This video is about Germany's dramatic turnaround in post-war Europe. Subscribe for more. Berlin, 1945. The city laid in ruins, a shell of its former self, smoke curling from the remnants of buildings once grand and proud. The war had ended, but the scars were fresh, bleeding into the fabric of European society. Within the shattered walls of the Reichstag, the flickering light of a single candle illuminated the faces of four men, each a reflection of a nation on the precipice of transformation. Hans Emler, a weary German officer, sat hunched in his chair, his uniform tattered and stained with the remnants of battle. He had fought fiercely for a cause that now lay in ashes. With the Third Reich crumbling, a new reality dawned, but uncertainty gnawed at his insides. Would he be vilified as a war criminal or hailed as a rebuilder of a new Germany? Across from him, Robert Hayes, a fresh-faced American intelligence officer, glanced over a map of Europe, the ink still damp from the press. His mission was clear: to understand the shattered remnants of Germany and to help guide its rebirth. He was burdened by the responsibility of his role in the larger scheme of world affairs, but he saw potential amidst the destruction. His eyes met Hans's, a silent acknowledgement of shared trauma and hope. In the corner, a shadowy figure loomed: David Cohen, an Israeli operative. He had come to Germany not with the intention of making allies, but to watch. The Holocaust had claimed his family, leaving him as both witness and avenger. The birth of Israel was imminent, but amidst the turmoil, he felt the weight of vengeance pressing upon him. Would Germany's resurrection absolve its sins, or would it remain a festering wound in the heart of Europe? Lastly, there was Alina Richter, a fierce German journalist with a fierce resolve in her eyes. For Alina, the war had stripped away the illusions of nationalism, revealing the human cost of conflict. She needed to expose the truth, the stories of the innocent buried beneath the rubble. More than just a survivor, she was a beacon of resilience, determined to shape the narrative of Germany's future. As they gathered, the conversation turned to the fate of a continent. The Allies had taken control, and the impending division of Germany into East and West loomed large. Yet beyond borders lay a deeper conundrum: how to rebuild a nation whose very identity had been tainted by tyranny. Robert spoke of the Marshall Plan, an initiative to inject vitality back into Europe. "We have to help them rebuild, not just with money but with hope," he urged, his American idealism shining through the darkness. Hans's brow furrowed as he candoured. "Hope is scarce when the world sees us as monsters. How can we rebuild our nation when our people are demonized?" His voice trembled with pain, the weight of collective guilt resting on his shoulders. David leaned forward, his voice a low growl. "You think the Jews will ever forgive? My family was annihilated, and you expect us to see Germany as anything but a graveyard of betrayal. I came here to see justice served, not a nation revitalized." Alina interjected, "And what about the future? If we don't forge a path forward, we re-perpetuating the cycle of hatred. We need to share our stories, to confront the past, not hide from it." As the conversation swirled, the air thickened with tension. The central conflict, the struggle between guilt and redemption, between vengeance and reconciliation, tugged at each of them. But just as they reached a tentative agreement to work together, an unexpected sound shattered their fragile camaraderie, the echo of footsteps approaching. A knock on the door sent a chill down their spines, and suddenly an ironclad urgency filled the room. With a nod, Robert moved to the door, opening it cautiously. A tall man clad in a military uniform stood at the threshold. He was a general, a representative of the American occupying forces. His expression was grim, and the weight of his presence loomed heavily. "Hayes," he began, his voice steady yet commanding. "We have intelligence that a faction of former Nazis is regrouping, plotting to undermine the Reformation efforts in Germany. They are leveraging the chaos to recruit disillusioned citizens. We need your help to infiltrate them and dismantle their plans before they can gain traction." The room fell silent, the gravity of the situation sinking in. The prospect of a resurgence of fascism was a grim spectre hovering over their fragile discussions. Hans felt a surge of anger mixed with fear. "You would trust us to infiltrate. We are the very remnants of what you seek to destroy." His voice quivered with outrage, but a flicker of resolve ignited in his heart. Alina turned to him, her eyes fierce. "We can't allow the past to dictate our future. We must know if there are still those who wish to drag us back into darkness. This could be our chance to prove that Germany can change." David, torn between his need for vengeance and the possibility of something greater, remained silent. The war had stripped him of his family, but it had also left him with a void that craved understanding. Could he trust these Germans, even in the face of retribution? Robert stepped forward, determination etching lines across his young face. "We need to act quickly. If we can infiltrate this faction, we might not only expose their plans but also show the world that Germany can be reborn." It is a risk, but it could lead us to a future where we stand not as enemies but as allies. The general nodded, the tension in the room palpable as the stakes rose. You will have support, but the operation must remain covert. Trust will be your greatest weapon, but it will also be your greatest risk. Once you dive into the underbelly of this faction, there may be no turning back. The weight of those words hung heavy in the air. Each of them knew the risks involved. The conflict within them swelled. Could they pull together the shattered pieces of their nations to forge something new? In that moment, a decision was made, one that would alter the course of history. They would join forces, bound by the collective desire to confront the past while daring to sculpt the future. But as they prepared to embark on this perilous journey, the flickering candlelight danced ominously, casting long shadows that whispered of secrets yet to be uncovered. As they planned their next move, a sudden realization struck Hans. The echoes of war were not easily silenced, and the quest for redemption would demand sacrifices none of them were prepared to make. The haunting specter of the past would always linger, threatening to unravel their fragile alliance before it even began. Outside, the remnants of Europe lay strewn in chaos, a battlefield of ideologies awaiting resolution. The specter of revolution and retribution loomed large, shadowing their every step as they stood at the precipice of a journey that could lead to both salvation and destruction. Would they uncover the truth behind the resurgence of fascism, or would they find themselves ensnared in the very web they sought to dismantle? As the night deepened, the stakes escalated, and the questions loomed larger in the ruins surrounding them. The echoes of history demanded an answer. The flickering candlelight cast elongated shadows across the room, and an air of trepidation settled over the group as they began to strategize. Robert spread out the map across a nearby table, the ink revealing the scars of the recent war, divided territories of East and West Germany, highlighting the fragility of alliances. He traced the lines with a finger, his mind racing to connect both geography and the human element. We need to identify where these factions might be operating. Intelligence suggests the regrouping in the disaffected areas, places where the economic toll has been most severe, he said, glancing at Hans. Hans' brow furrowed, and he nodded gravely. Many of us who served in the Wehrmacht were left with no jobs and no hope. A resurgence of Nazi ideology could prey on our desperation. David leaned in closer, his eyes narrowing. So we need to infiltrate the very fabric of this solution. It is a dangerous gamble, but it is our only chance to uncover their plans. Alina's voice rang out with determination. If we do this, we must be prepared for the backlash. We need to show the German people that collaboration with allies can lead to a new identity, one that does not rest on the foundations of hate. As the four of them exchanged glances filled with both fear and resolve, they began to develop a plan, each contributing their unique perspectives. Robert took charge, urging them to leverage their disparate backgrounds. Hans, you will have insights into the disillusioned veterans. David, your skills will be essential in gathering intelligence within the Jewish communities, those who might still have grudges against Germany. Lena, your ability to connect with the press and civilians can be our bridge to the people. A sudden knock on the door startled them, a firm reminder that the outside world held dangers far greater than anything they faced within their fragile alliance. Robert opened the door to find a young soldier, eyes wide with urgency. Sir, he said, breathless, we've received reports of violent rallies in the outskirts. Ex-Nazis are gathering, inciting rebellion against the Allied forces. We need to act now. The room tensed as Robert exchanged looks with each member of the group. It appears we may not have the luxury of time. We must move quickly, but we have to remain discreet. Hans stood, adrenaline pumping through him. I have connections among the veterans. I can reach out to them, speak to those who are lost. If they be receptive, we may be able to gather intelligence on these factions. But David, still grappling with his desire for vengeance, felt a flicker of purpose. Many are still unwilling to trust Germany, but I can appeal to those who want to see justice served, not hatred perpetuated. Talina nodded vigorously. My articles can highlight the importance of cooperation. A shared future can guide us away from the past. People need to see that unity is possible. As they divided their tasks, a sense of urgency propelled them into action. They knew the path ahead was fraught with danger, but if their gamble paid off, they could strike a blow against the resurgence of fascism while paving a new path for Germany. The cool night enveloped Berlin as they dispersed, shadows weaving through the wreckage of the city. Hans made his way to a local tavern, a faded establishment where disgraced veterans often sought solace. The air reeked of stale cigarette smoke and despair. As he stepped inside, eyes turned toward him, whispers trailing in his wake. He approached a table where a group of men sat, their faces worn and hardened by loss. A gentleman, Hans began, his voice steady despite the weight of the words. "We're at a crossroads. The war is over, but our struggle continues. There are forces among us seeking to reignite the flames of hatred. We need to unite to combat this." Skepticism hung in the air like a thick fog, but one man, a tall figure named Gerhard, leaned forward. "And what of the Jews? Can we trust them? They will never forgive us." Hans clenched his fists, determination igniting within him. "Forgiveness is not our goal, Gerhard. The future of our nation depends on acknowledgement, on rebuilding trust. We need to be a part of the solution, not the problem." Gerhard's eyes flickered, but doubt remained evident. "You think they'll accept us? We've lost everything, our honor, our country. Why should we help build one that might never accept us? It's because we owe it to ourselves, and to those who suffered at our hands," Hans replied, his voice rising above the murmurs. "If we do nothing, we will be forever remembered as monsters. It is time to choose who we want to be." After a tense silence, Gerhard nodded slowly, the hesitation giving way to a shared resolve. "Then we will fight together, but if it comes to it, I will not hesitate to defend our own." Meanwhile, David moved through the darkened streets toward the Jewish community center. He approached a gathering of people gathered in hushed tones, the air thick with memories of recent loss and lingering anger. He found a familiar face among them, Sarah, a childhood friend whose family had been ripped apart by the horrors of the Holocaust. She whispered, the surprise evident in her eyes. "What are you doing here? We don't want anything to do with Germany." "I know, Sarah," he replied, his voice shaking slightly. "Ex-Nazis are regrouping, and they seek to exploit our pain for their own gain. We need to unite against this." She looked skeptical, her brow furrowed. "You want us to work with them? After everything?" "No, I want us to work with those who seek a new path, who want to help rebuild instead of destroy. I can't erase what happened, but I can help endure doesn't happen again." The weight of his words hung heavily between them, the truth resonating in the air. Her resolve softened, and she nodded slowly. "If you believe this, then we will listen. But know this, trust is earned, not given lightly." As the night deepened, Lena ventured toward the offices of her newspaper, her mind racing with the possibilities of what her words could accomplish. She could already envision the headlines that would stir the hearts of a weary nation. If she could inspire hope, perhaps she could rewrite a narrative of reconciliation instead of division. The next morning, she penned an article titled "In New Germany, United We Stand." Her words echoed the struggles and triumphs of the human spirit, urging her readers to embrace a future of cooperation. The poignant stories of survival and resilience splattered across the pages reminded the citizens of Germany of the shared humanity that could bind them together, despite the chasms of the past. As the sun rose on a new day, the four of them prepared for the battles that lay ahead, each determined to dismantle the resurgence of hatred that threatened to engulf their shared future. Yet, as they moved forward, a sinister undercurrent lingered in the shadows, promising that the fight was far from over. Unbeknownst to them, the factions they sought to infiltrate were already aware of their movements. The night held secrets, and the specter of treachery loomed closer, its icy grip tightening around their aspirations. Would they succeed in unearthing the dangerous undercurrents threatening to drown their hard-won hopes? Or would the darkness of history once again swallow their fragile alliance whole? As the whispers of revolution and retribution began to echo in the streets, each step they took could lead them either closer to redemption or deeper into the abyss. The battle for a new identity had only just begun, and the hearts of nations hinged on their courage to confront the past. The sun rose over Berlin, casting a muted glow through the debris-strewn streets. Each ray felt like a promise, yet uncertainty cloaked the city like a heavy fog. Hans, Robert, David, and Alina gathered again in the dimly lit room of the Reichstag, a makeshift headquarters, as they prepared for the tasks they had set for themselves. The air was charged with anticipation, the weight of their mission pressing down upon them. Robert unfurled the map once more, tracing the lines of division between East and West. "We need to move quickly. The longer we wait, the more these factions will solidify their power. Intelligence suggests several gatherings might occur in the next few days." His finger paused, resting over what was once a bustling neighborhood, now a site of desperation. "This is where we'll start." Alina leaned in, her resolve unwavering. "If we can mobilize the public, show them that change is possible, we can diminish the allure of these radical ideologies. I'll write about the gatherings. We'll expose their intentions." David, still grappling with his war-torn past, added, "And I'll reach out to the Jewish community. There are many who still harbor deep-seated resentment, but I believe I can convince some to rally against the remnants of Nazism. We need solidarity more than ever. Hans clenched his jaw, but a flicker of hope ignited within him. I'll contact my fellow veterans. If we can create a sense of purpose among them, perhaps they'll resist the allure of the past. We must show them that a new identity is waiting to be forged, one that doesn't rely on hatred. As they divided their tasks, a palpable energy filled the room. Each knew the stakes were incredibly high. The remnants of a fractured Europe lay before them, a battlefield not just of land but of ideologies. The first step was a gathering scheduled for that evening at an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city, a site chosen for its isolation and darkness. Robert and Hans made their way there, the streets alive with the muted sounds of a city awakening from war. The factory loomed ahead, its rusted beams a ghost of a bygone era. Inside, a motley crowd had assembled, a mix of disillusioned veterans and loyalists clinging to antiquated ideals. The air was thick with anxiety, whispers of a resurgence echoing off the concrete walls. Hans' heart raced as he spotted Gerhard among them. He approached, a mixture of dread and urgency fueling his steps. "Gerhard," Hans called out, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "We need to talk." Gerhard turned, his expression wary. "What are you doing here, Hans? Don't you want to be a part of the solution?" "I do. But we need to face the truth. This gathering, these men are not here to rebuild. They want to ignite another war." Hans pressed. "We cannot allow this to happen." Gerhard crossed his arms, skepticism evident in his posture. "We just turn our backs on our past and hope for the best." And no, Hans asserted, the weight of their shared history pressing heavily on him. "We fight back. Not with weapons, but with our voices. We need to reclaim our narrative." Before Gerhard could respond, a loud voice boomed from the back of the crowd. "The Allies will never understand, never accept us. We must take back what is ours." The words ignited a murmur of agreement, fist clenching as the crowd's mood shifted dangerously. Hans felt a surge of anger. "This is not the way," he shouted, his voice cutting through the rising tide of hostility. "We must unite against the true enemy, the hatred that seeks to divide us. We can't continue down this path of destruction." The tension in the room thickened as eyes turned toward Hans, some filled with skepticism, others with a glimmer of hope. Gerhard hesitated, then stepped forward. "What Hans says is true. We cannot afford to repeat our mistakes. We must come together for the sake of all of us." The crowd simmered, and slowly, murmurs of agreement began to rise. Meanwhile, David was making his way through the Jewish community center, the walls heavy with the echoes of loss. Sarah stood at the entrance, her arms crossed, still unsure of his resolve. "You think we can trust them?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They retrying," David insisted. "But we have to be vigilant. We need to uncover the plans of the ex-Nazis before it is too late. I need you to help me get the word out." Sarah's gaze softened as she considered his plea. "If we can unite, perhaps we can turn the tide, but it is a risk, though we have no choice," David replied, determination igniting within him. "If we want to ensure justice and prevent another catastrophe, we must act now." As they spoke, whispers traveled through the community, igniting a flicker of hope. Embers began to gather around them, their expressions a mix of skepticism and intrigue. David shared the urgency of their mission, his words resonating with the shared pain of their past. Back at the factory, Hans felt the atmosphere shift as a dialogue began to form between him and the gathered veterans. "We can shy away from our past, but we must learn from it. If the world sees us as monsters, we will remain so," he urged. Before the crowd could respond, a loud commotion erupted at the factory entrance. A group of ex-Nazi loyalists, faces hardened by anger, stormed inside. "What is this?" one bellowed, eyes darting across the room. "A traitor talking about unity. We must reclaim our Germany." The atmosphere crackled with tension, fists clenched and bodies tense. Hans stepped forward, commanding attention. "This isn't the way. We've already lost so much. Fighting among ourselves will only lead to more bloodshed." The leader of the faction stepped into the light, sneering. "And what do you propose, Hans? We should roll over and let the Allies dictate our future. You've lost your way." In that moment, the fragile alliance began to splinter, and fists flew as chaos erupted. Hans fought back against the tide, adrenaline surging through him. He needed to rally the men around him, show them that unity was their only hope against this resurgent darkness. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, shadows stretching across the city. Alina stood at her typewriter, her fingers flying over the keys as she chronicled the events of the night. A commitment to the truth fueled her words, determined to bring awareness to the rising conflict that threatened their fragile peace. But just as she finished her article, a knock echoed through her office. The door swung open, and a breathless Robert stepped in, urgency etched on his face. "Alina, it's worse than we thought. The factions are uniting. We need to warn the others." Alina's heart raced as she grabbed her notes. "We need to get this information out. The people must know the truth before it is too late." As they raced to join Hans and David, the shadows of the past loomed large. The battle for Germany's heart and soul had only just begun, and the echoes of war reverberated louder with each passing moment. Outside the factory, the tension escalated into a full-blown conflict. Hans and the ex-Nazi loyalists clashed fiercely, the sounds of struggle rising above the chaos. He fought not just for his life, but for a vision of a united Germany, a chance to rewrite their narrative. As fists collided and voices shouted, the realization struck Hans: the fight was not just for survival, but for the soul of a nation. He could feel the weight of history on his shoulders, the burden of redemption heavy in the air. But just as hope seemed to flicker within reach, a gunshot rang out, slicing through the din of chaos. Silence fell abruptly, and the world around them froze. The echoes of violence threatened to engulf their fragile alliance as uncertainty loomed larger than ever. Would this singular act of violence undo all they had fought for? Would the threads of unity they had begun to weave be shattered by the very darkness they sought to destroy? The fate of a nation hung in the balance, and as the smoke cleared, each of them realized they would need to confront not only external threats but the demons within themselves. The next chapter of this story awaited, and the stakes had never been higher. The gunshot echoed through the factory, a harsh reminder of the tension simmering beneath the surface. Time seemed to freeze as every eye turned toward the source of the sound. Hearts raced, and adrenaline surged. The fragile alliance forged with such hope teetered on the brink of collapse. Hans staggered back, his breath catching in his throat. He scanned the crowd, searching for the source of the chaos. The ex-Nazi loyalists had drawn weapons, their faces contorted in rage. The fight that had ignited moments ago morphed into something darker, a full-blown brawl that threatened to consume everyone present. Robert shouted, instinctively pulling Alina close as they ducked behind a nearby support beam. The sound of fists connecting, shouts of anger, and the clatter of bodies crashing to the ground filled the air. But amidst the fury, Hans stood resolute, his voice rising above the cacophony. "We cannot let this violence dictate our future. We need to choose unity over hatred." Gerhard, who had initially stood among the loyalists, hesitated. The weight of Hans' words began to seep through the haze of anger clouding his judgment. "Listen to him," Gerhard shouted, stepping away from the fray. "We cannot allow ourselves to be dragged back into darkness. We are better than this." But with Gerhard's defection, the tide began to shift. A few other veterans, still grappling with their own guilt, exchanged glances and hesitated between the two factions. The chaos intensified, but the flicker of hope sparked a response from within. David, spotting the shift, seized the moment. "If you with Hans come together, we can fight each other. We must fight the hatred that brought us to this point." As if spurred by a collective awakening, several men began to lower their weapons, their anger dissipating as they turned their attention to the possibility of something greater. David stepped forward, moving between the opposing groups. "This is about our families, our future. We have the power to shape what comes next together." The factory, once a symbol of despair, began to thrum with the energy of change. But just as a fragile truce seemed within reach, another gunshot pierced the air, this time closer. Panic erupted anew, and people dove for cover. Hans felt a sharp pain in his shoulder as he stumbled backward, the world around him spinning. Alina cried, rushing to his side as Robert pulled her back. Hans grimaced, leaning against a wall to steady himself, blood soaking through his shirt. He locked eyes with Gerhard, who rushed to his side, concern flickering across his face. The Gerhard shouted, but Hans shook his head, grit and determination coursing through him. "No one else can get hurt," he responded hoarsely. "This has to end here." He looked around at the men and women grappling with their pasts, their futures uncertain. "We all have wounds, visible and invisible. If we do not confront them, we will remain prisoners of our own making." David, whose heart raced with a mix of fear and resolve, stepped forward. "Hans is right. This violence is not the answer. We can't let our past dictate our future." He raised his voice above the turmoil. "Join us in building something new. We can fight for Germany, not against each other." Slowly, the realization dawned on many. The ex-Nazi loyalists, some still clutching their guns, hesitated, their resolve wavering. They looked at Hans, fallen yet unyielding, and at Gerhard, their former comrade turned to advocate for peace. The tension in the room shifted palpably. Alina took a deep breath, her words coming out strong. You all fought for a Germany that you believed in. If that belief is still alive in you, now is the time to prove it. The future we build depends on our choices today. The tension reached a breaking point, and then, one by one, the loyalists began to lower their weapons. The room was thick with the silence of disbelief and then a quiet murmur of realization. They understood that to rebuild the nation from the ashes, they needed to confront the demons of their past, not allow them to dictate their actions. At that moment, as if fate had orchestrated it, the door burst open and Robert and Alina rushed in alongside a medic. We're here to help. Robert shouted, immediately assessing the situation. He spotted Hans and his brow furrowed with concern as he rushed to his side. We need to get you out of here, Hans. We can leave now. Hans insisted, gritting his teeth against the pain. They need to see that we can overcome this darkness. As the medic knelt beside him, applying pressure to the wound, he looked up at Hans with concern. You were losing a lot of blood. We have to fix this now. But just as hope began to bloom, 3 men broke away from the remnants of the hostile faction. They turned and stormed out of the factory, their intentions clear. They were the dangerous remnant of a past that refused to die, intent on rallying support elsewhere. We've got to follow them. Robert shouted, realization dawning. The LL tried to regroup and incite violence again. Alina nodded, determination etched into her features. If we can intercept them, we can prevent another clash. We cannot allow them to gain momentum. With newfound resolve, the group banded together. David took charge of gathering those willing to stand against the remnants of hatred. We need to mobilize quickly. Together, we can confront and dismantle this threat. Hans, though weakened, felt the pulse of unity ignite within him as he rose to his feet with Gerhard's help. We may be wounded, but we can take a stand. They have chosen fear, we can choose hope. As they burst into the night, the streets of Berlin illuminated by moonlight, the reality of their mission weighed heavily upon them. They rushed to catch up with the former loyalists, their hearts racing. Each step felt crucial, not just for their lives, but for the future of a nation on the brink of rebirth. The group arrived at a nearby square where the hostile faction had gathered a small crowd. The atmosphere crackled with danger, but determination surged through them. They had a chance to intercept the narrative before it spiraled out of control. Hans, you need to speak, Gerhard urged as they reached the edge of the crowd. You have the power to sway these people. I can do it alone, Hans replied, wincing but resolute. We all need to stand together. David stepped forward, locking eyes with the crowd. You've been led astray by anger, but there's another path. We can reclaim our narrative. We can be a part of something greater than ourselves. Alina followed suit, her voice ringing out. If we allow hatred to guide our actions, we will only repeat the mistakes of our past. We must choose unity, for it is in unity that we find strength. As the crowd's murmurs escalated, their message began to resonate. Hesitance turned into contemplation, and uncertainty flickered in the eyes of those present. The ex-Nazi loyalists, who once sought to incite fear, felt the wind-shift possibility of redemption drifting through the square. Finally, Hans stepped forward, his voice steady despite the pain coursing through him. I once fought for a Germany built on fear and hatred. But I stand here now, wounded yet alive, because I believe in a different future. A future where we can confront our past and emerge united, not divided. The crowd began to shift, and the movement surged through them. People tentatively lowered their fists, exchanging glances laden with the weight of history. As the darkness of their shared past faded into the background, it was replaced by the light of a new dawn, the dawn of cooperation and understanding. They had faced the specter of violence and emerged resilient. The fight for a new Germany was not over, but hope flickered in their hearts. In that moment, the future was theirs to shape. Together, they could forge a new identity, not one built on hatred but on a promise of redemption. As the sun began to rise over Berlin, illuminating the remnants of a war-torn city, the echoes of unity rang louder than the whispers of division. They had chosen to stand together, and in that choice they found their strength. The story of Germany's resurrection had only just begun, and through courage and unity they were determined to write a new chapter in the annals of history.